Asato ma sangamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityama amritam gamaya avir ma edhi rudra dakshinamutam Tenamam Pahinityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through, O Lord, and evermore protect us with your sweet and compassionate face. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, it's the wrong spot, huh? Okay. So the title of today's talk is on the multiverse. And of all places, the multiverse is going to start in St. Louis. St. Louis, the Swami who is in charge of St. Louis, who started the center there, his name was Swami Arupeshananda. He was a disciple of Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda. And someone once asked the Swami if he thought that Vedanta would ever take root in this country, if it would actually catch on here. And he said yes, it would, but that it would not be recognized. And that actually isn't his idea originally. Swami Vivekananda talks in this strain, although not quite so specifically, in many of his lectures about how the influence of Vedanta through the millennia has been profound, widespread, but very subtle, and for the most part, not recognized. So Swami Arupeshananda's prediction was in line with the general teachings that Swami Vivekananda gives us in his complete works. And so I found this interesting to try and find the hidden Vedanta in pop culture. And there have been a few within my lifetime. There have been a few pretty salient examples. There was a movie, a big deal movie about 20 years ago called The Matrix. Now, The Matrix to me really seemed like Maya. That's what I thought the movie was. It was Maya. And what happens in the movie? You have a protagonist who is trying to see through this Maya. He's trying to see through this Matrix. Right? He learns from someone who knows already, in other words, a guru, someone who has already seen through the Matrix. He learns that this is an illusion. And then he learns from this teacher that he has to practice mind control techniques so that he can see through this illusion. In other words, he has to practice yoga. So you've got the idea that this world is not what it appears to be. You find a teacher who's seen through it, and he encourages you to practice mind control techniques, yoga. And what happens at the end of the movie? He sees through the Matrix. Basically, he has samadhi. So you've got samadhi, you've got yoga, you've got guru, you've got Maya. All these things are right there in the movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. But none of those words are used, right? And the movie, I think, caused a paradigm shift in pop culture. I mean, people talk about The Matrix now in a way that they didn't before the movie came out. Before that, of course, there was the original Star Wars. That was going back even further, 1970-something, 7 or 8. And in it, you have something very similar, right? You've got a protagonist who is going to learn the ways of the Force. What is the Force? Well, you could say it's Shakti, or maybe it's Prana, depending on what you thought. The kind of divine power that flows through everything, all right? So he's going to learn the ways of the Force, and again, he finds a perfected master to teach him the ways of the Force. And then he goes and practices yogic techniques, mind control, to empower himself with the Force. And this one actually, the hand of the puppeteer is actually more visible, I think, in Star Wars than in The Matrix, because George Lucas was a director, I guess, of Star Wars. He got the idea from Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Joseph Campbell, probably some of you know, was an initiated disciple of Swami Nikhilananda in New York. So he's a Vedantist. And this whole, the idea of a protagonist who goes away and practices something from a master and then empowers himself, all this stuff comes out of Joseph Campbell's book. And Joseph Campbell, of course, was heavily influenced by Vedanta. So I'm getting to why I decided to talk on the multiverse today, and that is because it's been kind of a buzz lately. There's been talk about the multiverse, and so I was wondering, is this some kind of pop culture shift like these other things? And so my idea when I started this talk was that the multiverse was Brahman. That was my idea. I'm not sure, actually, after having gone through this. We'll see at the end. We'll revisit that question at the end. But for now, I think what we have to first figure out is what is the multiverse. There are a few different ways of going about it. The way I chose to go about it today is the way that is most consistent with current science fiction thinking, and that is the path of quantum mechanics. So you'll have to forgive me. We're going to take a little physics detour here, okay? Can't entirely avoid this. So there are multiple interpretations of quantum mechanics. One of these interpretations gives us the existence of a multiverse, okay? So I'm going to try and explain how that works. And to do this, I'm going to start with something very ordinary. Okay, this is a box. Inside this box is a ball that bounces forever. Okay, it's a perfectly elastic ball. Bounces forever inside the box. Okay? Now, what I do instantaneously is I divide this box in two. So I put a partition in the middle of this box. Huh? Oh, okay. Okay, that's a new wrinkle. I'll figure out what to do with that.
Multi-mic.
What? I missed it. Multi-mic. Oh, yeah, okay, very good. Okay, so what do we know? We put a partition down the middle of the box. What do we know? We know now that the ball is confined to bounce on one side of the box or the other. We know that the ball is on one side of the box, in one side of the box or the other. Okay, we know this. This is common sense. This is classical mechanics. Everybody knows this, okay? Now, what is the quantum mechanical situation? Say it's not a ball, okay? So I put the partition down the middle of the box. Let's say instead of a ball inside the box bouncing, we have a quantum mechanical particle, an electron, I'll say, okay? So now instead of a ball that bounces forever, I have an electron that bounces forever. Oops, I forgot my mic. Okay, so now what's the difference between this and the bouncing ball? The difference is, even though I put my partition down the middle of the box, now I cannot say that the electron is on one side of the box or the other. Just like I divided the box with the bouncing ball before, then I knew that the ball is on one side of the box or the other. If I do it with an electron, I can't say that. I cannot say, even if I can't chop the electron in half, but I cannot say that the electron exists in one half of the box or the other. The electron is described by something called a state vector, and the state vector fills the box. I can actually, assuming the partition had two sides, I could take this box apart. I could take one half of the box, so I'll redraw this. I could take one half of the box and put it on the other side of the room, which I can't draw, of course, on the board. So here's the other half of the box over here. I still can't say that the particle is in one half of the box or the other. I can't say that. I don't know that, all right? I could take this thing to Las Vegas. One half of the box is in Las Vegas, and the other half is here. And I still can't say that the electron is in one box or the other until I look at it. That's the super weird part of quantum mechanics, until I look at it. Once I look at it, everything changes. I go to Las Vegas, and I open my, assuming I could see an electron, which you can't, but just for the sake of argument, assume I could. You go to Las Vegas, you open the box. Now, suddenly, just because I looked at it, the particle is in one half of the box or the other. So I'm not sure if you're following me here. Originally, we had a ball bounced around. I cut the box in half. It was stuck on one half of the box or the other, because that's what we know. If I do the same thing with a quantum mechanical particle, we don't know that until I look at it. When I look at it, everything changes. Okay? This is very weird. I'm not sure if it impresses you just how weird this is, but what this says is, first of all, I am a participant in every event that I observe. There is no such thing in this universe as an independent, objective observer. Doesn't exist. You are an actor in every situation that you look at. In this, it might be acceptable to think that way. But when you think, okay, I'm in the second or third floor of my apartment building, and I look down on the streets and I see an accident on the streets, how can I say that I'm a participant in that accident? I seem like an objective observer, right? Well, quantum mechanics says no. You are a very, very, very small participant, but a participant nonetheless. You are a participant in that accident. This has been called an epistemological explanation of quantum mechanics because it doesn't tell us about what the electron is. What it tells us is what we know about the electron. By extension, this is another super weird thing, by extension, since quantum mechanics is the foundation of biology, chemistry, and classical physics, what we know about this world, how we measure this world, what we look at in this world, we are not learning about the properties of this world. This world has no properties until we ask it the question, what are your properties? And then depending on how we ask that question, it will give us a different answer. So one of the philosophical extensions of quantum mechanics is that nature has no qualities until you ask it the question, what are your qualities? And then depending on how you ask it this question, it will give you some answer, some qualities. This is why it's called an epistemological explanation of quantum mechanics. Okay, so I think I've impressed you. This is pretty weird. All right. Now, the muddy waters are going to get muddier, okay, because this, what I've just described, is one way of explaining the particle in the box. This is the way that you learn at the university. This is the way that quantum mechanics was discovered back in the 20s, and it was argued, what the heck does this stuff mean, by many brilliant men. And mostly, I think, by the force of personality of Niels Bohr, this explanation won, what I just gave you. This is the official Copenhagen interpretation called the orthodox explanation of quantum mechanics. Okay. And so that was thought actually to be the only legitimate explanation of quantum mechanics for many decades. But now it turns out, with the decades rolling by, that we have several other explanations of quantum mechanics that work equally well. And each one brings its own flavor of weirdness to the table. They're all weird. And there's a whole lot of activity in the field, people trying to find an explanation of quantum mechanics that isn't weird. Nobody can do it. What you wind up doing is exchanging one kind of weirdness for another. So the explanation of quantum mechanics that I'm going to talk about is called the many worlds interpretation. And the weirdness you get out of it is the multiverse. This many worlds interpretation was thought up in the 50s by a grad student at Princeton named Hugh Everett. And it was initially laughed off. What does it say? Okay. Now, I have The same problem, the electron in the box, okay? But now I can say it's definitely in one part of the box or the other. So this problem I had before where the electron is kind of in both boxes or neither box, or I can't say where it is, that's gone. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics gets rid of that. What happens when I open the box according to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics? What happens is the universe splits in two. That's their answer. The universe splits in two. In one, I take the box, I go to Las Vegas, I open the box, and I see, there's an electron in the box. Now there is another universe where another me is in another Las Vegas looking at another box and says, there's no electron here, right? And the instant I find my electron in Las Vegas, so now this is the Las Vegas electron. Then there's a universe, in Hollywood, there's no electron, box is empty. That's universe 1. Universe 2 is the reverse. Universe 2, there's no electron in Vegas, there's an electron in Hollywood. Okay? This is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And probably you're having a hard time believing me at this point. But this is real. Whatever else, I should say this explanation is real. Is the multiverse real? Well, we'll get to that. But people are really using this. This multiverse interpretation of quantum mechanics is actually the second most popular interpretation of quantum mechanics among, there was a conference on quantum foundations 7 or 8 years ago. They polled all the visiting scientists there to ask them, because there's many other versions of quantum mechanics I'm not going to talk about today, and they're all super weird. They polled the visiting scientists to ask them, what's your favorite version of quantum mechanics? This was number 2, the multiverse. Number 1 is the one I started with, which maybe isn't too surprising because that's what you learn at school, right? So that's your kind of condition to go with that one. This is number 2. So the scientists are actually using this idea of the multiverse to get real-world calculations. In cosmology, that's one field. Another one, kind of surprisingly, is quantum computation. You heard about quantum computers. A lot of the computations done with quantum computers, the algorithms, I should say, for those computations are derived using this multiverse, many worlds interpretation framework of quantum mechanics. Okay, so it is being taken seriously. It wasn't always. Initially, it was laughed off. People thought this was absurd, like probably some of you do, right? But this brings up, okay, that's enough physics. I think we're done with physics, at least mostly. Now I'd like to talk about the implications of this. First of all, several questions come to mind. Is this really happening? Right? What is it really saying? What it's really saying is that every time there's a quantum mechanical process, okay, that's a lot. There's a lot of quantum mechanical processes going on in this room right now, okay? Every time there's a quantum mechanical process, the universe splits. You have this constantly bubbling, branching universe, multiple timelines going forward, okay? And there's no trunk of the tree. So there's quantum mechanical processes going here, causing all kinds of branchings in other places, in other worlds, right? And in these other universes, they're branching their own other universes. This is not an infinite number, but an inconceivably large number of universes branching all the time. That's what it's saying. That's what the theory says. And so the question is this really happening? Is this real? I think that's the first, probably most pressing question that comes to mind. And for better or worse, according to Vedanta, and really it's not, you could say it's according to Vedanta, it's a Vedanta vocabulary word, but the fact is physics can't really tell us what's real. It just tells us what is consistent with sensory input. That's it, right? Yes, the multiverse explanation is consistent with sensory input. It works, and it works really well. Just like all the other bizarre interpretations of quantum mechanics is responsible for solid-state electronics and photocells, which means without quantum mechanics, no computers, no cell phones, no solar panels, no garage door openers, no digital cameras. Basically, life as we know it, a lot of it would be gone without quantum mechanics. So it works. Is it real? Well, that's a difficult question, right? My feeling actually is that what is real is the teaching of the Rig Veda. The teaching of the Rig Veda is Ekam Sat, one existence. There is one existence, right? Sages call it variously, right? So I would say quantum mechanics is a kind of polymorphism, right? There's one something there, and we're explaining it in all these different ways, right? And they don't seem to cohabit very well together. They don't seem like they all make sense, right? But the teaching of the Rig Veda is actually broader than just physics. It doesn't say physical existence is one. It just says one existence, Ekam Sat, one existence, right? And it's broader because the same basic problem comes up in religion, right? You've got all these explanations of existence in all these different religions, and they seem completely incompatible, right? The Mormons think that in one of these planets lives God, who's a guy, and he lives there with his wife, okay? That's the Mormon belief, right? God lives in the sky on one of these planets with his wife. Now, the Muslims say God is formless, right? How could these two things possibly both be true, right? Well, while they might not both be true, like physics, they might both be right. In other words, they are operationally correct. Just like physics works and you can't really explain it perfectly, uniquely, the same thing with religion, which Sri Ramakrishna actually figured out for himself. I'm presenting a kind of intellectual parallel between conflicting scientific explanations and conflicting religious explanations. Sri Ramakrishna actually walked the religious path and found that all these things are operationally correct. Just like our cell phones and computers and garage door openers tell us that quantum mechanics works, Sri Ramakrishna walked the religious path and found that all these religions work, whether or not they agree according to our minds, right? But back to the Rig Veda, one truth, one existence. One existence. You want to look at it physically, you will find different explanations. You want to look at it metaphysically, you will find different explanations. It is one. We try and explain it this way or that way. And Swami Vivekananda says that this conclusion, this idea that modern science and the Rig Veda are sort of illustrating the same truth is essential. That is the sign of a great truth, he says, that you can take it and apply it in different situations, right? So we have the same idea, one existence, different explanations in physics and religion. And Swamiji says it must be so. This is the proof of truth. The rishis proceeded in their inquiry, taking up mind as the basis. They analyzed the mental part of this universe and came to certain conclusions, which the scientists, analyzing the physical part, must come to, for they both lead to the same center. So is the multiverse real? Well, difficult to say. It's not wrong. That's what you could say. It's not wrong. What is real to me seems to be the teaching of the Rig Veda, which is that there is one existence, and we can look at it in all these different ways. One of the ways we can look at it is in this bizarre multiverse way, with all these timelines branching, and I'm going to get into that right now, okay? I think the next, probably most pressing question in this multiverse business is there another me? right? That's another, we see this in the sci-fi movies. Is there another me in the multiverse? The answer there is kind of yes and no. Because remember, I opened the box in Las Vegas and the universe splits into two pieces. And remember, that's just one. The universe is constantly splitting all the time along multiple timelines, right? Everywhere, right? It's constantly sort of boiling soup of universes. So the instant I look at the box in Las Vegas, okay, I see the electron. There's another me in another universe who opens the box and doesn't see the electron. Another me, what does that mean? It means another Swami Arupeshananda. It does not mean another I, right? This is obvious to us because we don't perceive these multiverses, right? We have one I and one coherent existence that seems to more or less make sense sometimes. And so, while there are many copies at this time that are created of this body-brain system, there is one I. Now, how do you explain that, okay? First of all, how would the materialists explain it? That's generally where a lot of the scientists are coming from. The scientists, at least the ones that I've known, well, a lot of them, believe in that consciousness is a consequence of matter. So matter comes first. Consciousness is an epiphenomenon of matter. So in other words, when biochemistry gets complicated enough, somehow it's alive. Somehow it becomes aware, right? This is another big question in AI. Can you make a computer complicated enough where suddenly consciousness is there, right? Personally, I don't think so. But that is their position, right? So what happens in their view, and there are some actual scientists who've written about this, but mostly this is a question for philosophers. What happens in their view is the universe splits. There's 260-pound lumps of Swami Arupeshananda in the new universe, right? There's one in this one in the next one. The lump in the next universe sprouts its own individuality that is associated with its body-brain state, memories, unique personal history, and all that, right? From that point forward, multiple timelines are available to us, right? So that Swami Arupeshananda may go forward and break his arm, where this one doesn't, right? But there is one I, because each body sprouts its own I, because consciousness is a consequence of matter in the view of the materialists. Of course, the religious people will tell you the reverse, that consciousness comes first and then matter, right? And so how do they explain this one I, this continuity of perception that we have in view of this multiverse? Swami Vivekananda tells us, he says, that there is one I. There's only one. He says, bodies and minds change, but the same voice, I am, is eternal, unchangeable. And that I, which we mistake to be a little I, limited, is not only my I, but yours, the I of everyone, of the animals, the angels, the lowest of the low. There is one I in the universe. Again, we are back to the Rig Veda. One existence, right? But how does that work? Well, if we agree to the proposition that consciousness comes first and is independent of matter, then actually his conclusion is kind of inescapable, because once you peel off all the physical stuff, male, female, the brain with all its memories, right, you're left with I am. That's it. There's no Democrat or Republican or black or white or fat or thin or any of that stuff. It's all gone. And all these modifiers, upadis, labels that we put on to that first personal pronoun are gone, right? If consciousness doesn't need matter. And so when you strip all that off, what's the difference between my I am and anybody else's I am? They're all the same. There's only one I am. That's the idea, right? So the Vedantic explanation is in the new universe with the new Swami Arupeshananda looking in the box, It's that same one consciousness. But just like this Swami Arupeshananda ignorantly asserts his individuality, so will that one, right? That's the same basic problem he faces that this one faces, right? So the explanation, it turns out that yes, there's many copies of you, but there's still only one I, that one I, no matter how you look at it, according to this quantum mechanical explanation. So I think probably the next burning question, at least for me, was can I travel to any of these other universes, right? That's the big thing that you hear about in science fiction. Can I get there from here somehow? And well, almost certainly not. But while no one has the slightest clue how you could possibly do this, even theoretically, there is no one who has any idea. But what I'm talking about here is a time machine. And not only am I talking about a time machine, I'm talking about a very special time machine that can go forward along a timeline and then pick out intersections of other timelines in the multiverse and somehow steer around those timelines to get to some parallel universe, right? That's what I'm talking about. No one has any idea how to make that, even in theory. On the other hand, just because no one knows how to make it doesn't mean it's impossible. So according to Einstein's general theory of relativity, there is no rule against building a time machine. There is nothing in Einstein's theory of general relativity that says you can't build a time machine. Nothing there. On the other hand, there's one catch, which is you can't build a time machine that goes back in time to the point before the time machine was built. You can't do that. Okay, that's not allowed in the general theory of relativity. But you can build a time machine. So conceivably, you could navigate your way through some timeline till it intersects with other universes' timelines, so all the quantum numbers match up, and then you could navigate your way back to something, some other, just like in the sci-fi movies, right? You go to planet Earth where the Axis powers won the Second World War or something. Or you find some alternate universe where Swami Arupeshananda didn't join the monastery, he became president or something. Right? Is it that funny? Anyway. Or a multimillionaire, whatever the sci-fi fantasy is, right? You go to some alternate universe and you find yourself beloved, famous, powerful, you have superpowers, right? In the next universe, you're Spider-Man or whatever. Not impossible. Almost certainly impossible, but as far as we know, not actually impossible. So, I asked, that's the third question. The first question I asked was, is this real? Right? Is this multiverse business real? And Vedanta gave me one existence. Physics says it's correct. That's what physics says, it's correct. Vedanta says there is one existence and you are choosing to explain it that way. Then I asked, is there another me in the multiverse? And physics said there's another kind of, carbon bag of salty water there, but it has its own individuality, right? Vedanta said there is only one existence. Again, back to the Rig Veda. There is one existence, right? You think it is somehow localized. You have a localized existence in this body, right? But in fact, there's only one existence. And now I ask, can I get to one of these other existences? Can I meet me as the president or whatever? Or can I travel to planet Earth where JFK was never assassinated, or Donald Trump is president forever, or something like that, right? What does Vedanta say? Vedanta says you are wasting your time. That's what Vedanta says. This idea that we are going to find a new life in a new universe with new exciting events to entertain us, like watching Hitler win World War II or whatever else it is. Or that we're going to find ourselves in some much more enviable, desirable life, right? That's what the sci-fi movies kind of give, right? That happened this summer. There was a movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is basically this idea, and that's what the multiverse is. It's everything everywhere all at once. All possible outcomes manifest, right? And so she surfs around in the movie and finds herself as famous and powerful and all these things. And this, according to Vedanta, is more or less what we're doing already. This is basically how we got here in the first place. This thirst. And it's interesting that the song that the Swami sang this morning is just right on point here. This thirst for a new experience, a new existence, that desire is what drags us from one life to the next. This is what Swami Vivekananda tells us. He says that we have already been born so many times, in so many worlds, and had so many experiences. We've been the king, we've been the presidents, we've had superpowers even, he says. I'll read it. He says, how many thousands of times have you been kings and rulers? How many times have you been surrounded by wealth and plunged into poverty? How many thousands of times have you been possessed of the greatest powers? But again, you had to become men, rolling down on this mad rush of karma's waters. And so not only have we been the president and all these things, we've had lives that were at the top of the heap, and we've had lives that were train wrecks. But we've also, he says, we've had superpowers. So we've actually already been Thor and Doctor Strange and all these people. We've already done that, right? And we think, well, that sounds pretty cool. I'd like to do some more. Let's go check out the multiverse, go find some other worlds, and go be Thor and Thanos and whoever else, right? And be rich and powerful and be the president. Why not? Sounds like a good ride. Well, I mean, it kind of appeals to our sense of curiosity. But Vedanta teaches the basic argument against this, that this is a zero-sum game, right? So for every life as a king, there's a life, a grinding life of anonymous peasanthood. And depending on how much damage we did when we were the king, there might be many, many, many lives of painful, grinding, anonymous peasantry. And so the idea is that you are going up and down and up and down and up and down, always oscillating around zero. And this oscillation never stops. And basically, you're just wasting your time doing this. Okay, that's what Vedanta says. Swami Vivekananda puts it pretty graphically. He says, how long will you go on sinking and diving down and going up for 5 minutes to again sink down, again come up and sink and so on, tossed up and down? How long will you be whirled on this wheel of karma, up and down, up and down? So that is the Vedantic answer to, can I travel around this multiverse? Basically, this is how you got here, this desire for an entertaining life, a new experience, some kind of sensation, titillation, something new and fun. That's why you're miserable now. That's why you're looking for another place in the multiverse now, is because that desire brought you here in the first place, right? And so it comes to this, right? Assuming you accept all these things, it's a lot to accept. There is a multiverse, right, with all these possible options, and we're basically wasting our time surfing around it. We'd like to stop doing this. What's keeping us doing this is desire, and the way to get out of this is to overcome our desire. So it comes down to overcoming desire. That is the job at hand. And now, finally, after almost 45 minutes, I get to say something practical, because this talk so far has been highly theoretical. I generally like to talk about practice more than that, because that's really what helps us in spiritual life is practice. It's ironic because the reason I studied physics in the first place is I thought these ideas were really cool, connecting Vedanta and metaphysics, right? I liked that idea. But then I learned, after doing this, that the intellectual thrill of connecting physics and metaphysics doesn't help us resist temptation, doesn't help us control our emotions, doesn't help us withstand the vicissitudes of life. It may be a thrill, it was. Thrills don't last, that's another problem, right? It's a thrill for a while. And insofar as it inspires us to practice spiritual life, it's useful. But in and of itself, these intellectual connections between these two fields don't really solve the problem of life, right? Here we're talking about how to overcome desire. And so this is why generally I don't talk about these things, because they're not that practical. So now here's a little practicality, and that is overcoming desire. And in the context of today's talk, where we're sort of fantasizing about this multiverse, what is an effective way to overcome this desire? I was looking this up, and it was Swami Arupeshananda, actually, who came to the rescue. And he said, that's Latu, one of Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciples. He said that the biggest problem is our imagination. We imagine these things, right? And it isn't just the multiverse. It's all kinds of stuff, right? It could be something, it could be dinner. You're at a friend's house or a restaurant or something, and you get a terrible meal, the worst meal you've ever had in your life, right? And you start thinking about another meal that you had once that was so good, so much better than the one you're eating right now, right? And you think, tomorrow I'll eat that other meal that was so good, that I liked so much, right? And then you have that meal the next day. And just think, if we had that meal every day, our favorite meal, the most wonderful meal we ever had, every day, how long would it take you to hate that meal? Would it be, I mean, if you had a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, by the end of one day, you would never want to see it, maybe, not for a long time. You would have it, and after a week, probably the side of that meal would make you want to puke. It's always something different, right? We can't have this, and no matter how wonderful the meal is, we can't have the same thing over and over again. Got to be something new, right? And it isn't just food, and it isn't just the multiverse, right? We're in our office, and suddenly there's an idea in our minds, like, I could be at the beach, right? I could be hiking in the mountains. These little images, these imaginations just pass into our minds so briefly, but they leave these impressions, and we want to go pursue them, right? And it's so ironic, because you get to the beach and you realize, oh, this is too hot and it's too crowded and I can't park and whatever else, and I should have just gone to Starbucks. It's air conditioned. I could just be drinking a cappuccino and looking at surfing the web or something, and then Starbucks, the coffee's actually no good, and there's no tables and whatever else, and I should have hiked. And then maybe, none of this is working. I need a vacation in Paris, and Paris is no good, and maybe I should have tried Prague. It's one thing after another, right? There's never an end point to this. And it's interesting because Swami Ashokananda actually says that this is just completely perverse, almost like it's a setup. We are being used by our senses. He says, our mind and our senses are our betrayers. First of all, they clamor for things, and you take the trouble to give them these things. Then, after a little while, they are dissatisfied with them. You see, they want to ride you. That is the only thing the mind and the senses want. We think they want specific things, and that if we give them those things, they will be peaceful. This is not true at all. This mind and senses want to make you work for them. That is all they want. So when you have done one thing, dissatisfaction comes and you are made to do another thing. Right? And the irony, the great irony of this, I think, is that this is generally what we call free will. Right? I can have whatever I want for dinner. I can go wherever I want on vacation. If I could just build a time machine, I'd be free to wander around the multiverse and go to some other world where things are different. Right? That's what we generally consider free will, the ability to do what I want. But the funny thing is, we don't maybe have it up to consciousness that these wants are just appearing in front of our minds and we're just chasing them like idiots, right? And we call that free will. And so the question is, how to overcome this, right? Swami Adbhutananda, Latu Maharaj, says that perhaps our greatest enemy in this capacity is our imagination. Well, how do we meet that? And my feeling is that we have to get in the habit of watching the mind. We have to have some ability to see the mind objectively and to be aware that these images crop up. Because the problem is, if we let the image of ourselves drinking a cappuccino in Paris sit in the mind uncriticized for a length of time, it grows in intensity and it pulls us. We start thinking about plane tickets and how to get there, right? But if we can catch it and go, oh, there's the mind, it just came up with this thing. If you can catch it soon, quickly, it loses much of its strength. But this requires some practice. To be able to see the mind objectively and catch it when it fantasizes about this stuff early is how to beat it. But that's not so easy to do. And sometimes also we're in a life situation where it's not really practical. Sometimes we have to remove ourselves from our current environments to be able to even start to practice these things. I remember back when I was at the lab, one of the guys there, he was a kind of a Casanova type. Ladies loved him, and he loved the ladies. And so that was wonderful for him. And then he found a lady that he wanted to be faithful to. And he came to my office and asked me, how do I do this? That was kind of interesting. But yeah, he came to, how do I do this? I said, well, stop thinking about other women. You know, from thoughts, actions proceed, right? So stop thinking about other women, and then you'll be able to be faithful to this one. He seemed to take that in. And he left, and a few days later he came back to the office and says, you know, this mind control thing, it doesn't work, you know. And I said, well, why? What happened? And he said, well, you know, what you said, from thoughts, actions proceed. Well, you know, my girlfriend left town for a few days, and so I went out with my buddies to a bar, and there was this beautiful bartender there, and I wound up making a connection with her. Well, yeah, okay, right. If you are trying, I mean, you have to remove yourself from the external environment. If you are trying to stop eating spicy foods, probably you should stop touring the chili cook-offs, right? I mean, it's just, it seems obvious when I say it that way. But he was no dummy. He was, in fact, now he is in a company with, I won't name it because that's not fair, but he works for a company with over 10,000 employees, and he's head of the entire fusion division. The guy's very talented and very smart. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can figure out how to overcome desire. You might be able to figure out quantum mechanics or whatever, but it does not mean that you can figure out how to overcome your own desires. And so that's enough practicality for today. And now I'd like to try and just very briefly talk about, is the multiverse Brahman? That was where we started with this. It's been a kind of a long excursion. Is the multiverse Brahman? That was my idea in the beginning. And my feeling is that at least the multiverse I talked about today isn't. That's my feeling. But The multiverse I talked about today is the one that you get from quantum mechanics. It's the one that you find in science fiction, in the movies and in the books, right, where you travel around timelines and all these things. That's not the only way to get to the multiverse. There's another multiverse that you can arrive at through Big Bang cosmology. Big Bang cosmology, one of the pictures it has is an entirely different kind of multiverse, which includes this one. And many other, it has this universe and all its multiverses and other universes and all their multiverses inside a giant kind of ocean of what I would think of as maybe Brahman. So there is possibly this connection to the multiverse of modern science being Brahman, but it's not the fun multiverse that you hear about in the movies and the books, where you get to travel through time and visit your alter ego, who's president of the United States or whatever. So as much as I said I'm not too keen on the connection between physics and metaphysics, I might actually do a multiverse part 2, where I look at this problem through the lens of Big Bang cosmology. I'm thinking about that. I have to see how that works. In the meantime, I'm very happy I get to introduce a new Swami here. His name is Swami Vedanta, and I met him about 10 years ago in Howrah, India. He was the English professor at Vivekananda University. I was, of course, the physics nerd at Vivekananda University. And he is extremely, Sri Ramakrishna said about Swamiji, his intelligence is as great as his learning. He said that once. I would say the same thing applies to our brother here. He has a PhD in English from UC Berkeley, and he's extremely bright. I know this from my own personal experience. In spite of all that, he is also very approachable, very down to earth, unpretentious. And so I'm very happy that he's here with us. And I look forward, he's also a very gifted speaker. So I look forward to hearing some of his contributions. And maybe Swami Vedanta, you could just come up here and say a few words just for a few minutes.
Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. It's wonderful to be here today, and thank you to Swami Arupeshananda ji for the very generous introduction. My humble pranams to revered Swami Sarvadevananda ji and all the other monks and monastics here. I thought in the brief time I had today that I would just discuss briefly how I first met revered Swami Sarvadevananda ji. It's an interesting story. And before I do that, I apologize if I look a little bit drowsy. In a parallel universe now, I'm fast asleep. I came from India about 3 days ago, so I think it's 12:30 midnight in India right now. So I'm still getting over jet lag. But in any case, 2009, as Arupeshananda mentioned, I finished my PhD in English literature and German philosophy. And right after that, I came down to here, Southern California. My parents were living in Calabasas at the time, so I was staying with them. I bought a one-way ticket to India because I had planned for many years to be a monk in India, start my monastic life in India. That was my heart was set on that. So I bought the ticket for like mid-September 2009. But then I thought, let me just, I saw on the website, on the Vedanta LA website, the Southern California website, that there's a very senior monk named Swami Swahananda, and he was a direct disciple of Swami Vijnanandaji, who was in turn a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. So I thought, this is a unique opportunity. Let me pay my respects to Swami Swahanandaji, get his blessings, and then go to India. That was my plan. So I drove down to this center, and I think I attended the evening arati, and then afterward I went to Swami Swahanandaji's room, And I did pranams to him, and he looked at me and he asked me about my background. So I think in like 1 or 2 minutes, I gave him a kind of rundown. I just finished my PhD from Berkeley, this and that. I want to be a monk in India. And then he said to me, I will give you Diksha. Diksha means spiritual initiation. And then I was sort of surprised by that. I wasn't expecting that. That came out of left field. And so I didn't say yes immediately. I didn't, because then I said, Maharaj, I was thinking of getting initiation in Belur Math in India. And then I realized he was a good salesman. He said to me, he said, in India, the problem is Diksha, initiation is given in large groups of 50 to 100 people. Here it'll be one-on-one. In the West, that's one advantage, actually. It's one thing that I don't know in this audience how many of you are initiated, but there's a unique advantage in getting initiated in the West by gurus like Swami Sarvadevanandaji, is that you get this one-on-one initiation. That's very unique, actually. I've only appreciated that later, actually. But anyway, I didn't say yes immediately. What I did was I went back to my house, and I was thinking about it, and I was talking to my uncle, who's a spiritual aspirant himself. He's a disciple, not a disciple, but a devotee of Sri Aurobindo. And I told him what had just transpired, and he said, are you crazy? He's a direct disciple of Swami Vijnanandaji. He's a very senior monk, and he's offering to give you Diksha, and you're hesitating. And then he said, your birthday's coming up. Why don't you ask him to give you Diksha on your birthday? So I came to my senses, and I told Swami Swananandaji, Maharaj, I'd be happy to take Diksha from you. Would it be possible to give Diksha on my birthday? I had the hubris to ask that. And he agreed very graciously. And so he initiated me in his room on my birthday, 24th August. And just immediately after he gave me initiation, he knew that I had a one-way ticket to India. He knew that I wanted to be a monk in India. But right after I was initiated, he said to me, I want you to join here in Hollywood under me. I don't know if it was a bait and switch or what it was, but in any case, now he's my guru, and he's like 91 years old. And so I feel stuck. And so he kind of coerced me into saying yes. So I grudgingly said yes, and he immediately gave me the form, the joining form. And I filled it out, but not very happily. And then I can't remember the exact time frame here, whether it was like hours or maybe like 1 or 2 days thereafter, but it was a very brief period after that, after I'd agreed reluctantly to join here in Hollywood. I was sitting in this temple, this very temple, feeling really somehow uneasy about this sudden change in my plans. And then I walked out these doors, and there are some benches, and I was sitting on the bench looking very pensive. And a kindly, elderly gentleman approached wearing pants and a tucked-in dress shirt, so I didn't know he was a monk. And he just sat next to me, and he asked me, what's the matter? You look concerned. And then I told him the whole situation. And then he said, let me tell you about how I joined the monastic order. And first of all, I said, wait a minute, are you a monk? So it turned out to be revered Swami Sarvadevanandaji. He might have been at a doctor's appointment or something. For some reason, he was wearing pants and a shirt rather than the typical ochre robes that we usually wear. And then I was stunned. So I said, okay. So at the time, he was assistant minister here in the Hollywood Center. And so I was very happy to talk to him. And then I asked him, Maharaj, what do you recommend I do? And he just gave one very simple but very, very helpful piece of advice. He said, you should follow your heart. And I took that advice to heart. And that gave me the courage to go back to Swami Swananandaji and to tell him, Maharaj, I have my heart set on being a monk in India. Please don't take that the wrong way. I want your blessings. And by God's grace, he was very gracious about it, and he was not upset at all. And I told him that I want to, once I come to India, before I join, I want to do a 6-month pilgrimage in India. And so he wrote a letter to all Swamis in India, please allow Brahmachari Ayan to remain in your ashrama for up to 3 nights. So I carried that letter around with me and traveled all over India, Rishikesh and Kanyakumari and many other places. And so I received his blessings, but I mentioned this because revered Swami Sarvadevananda played a very important role in my spiritual life, and I think it, in a certain sense, we can say this is my guru's play, that even though I somehow escaped joining in Hollywood, by hook or by crook, he's brought me back here. So I'm sure I'll talk to all of you at greater length in the future, but thank you again for coming. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Rama Krishna Pranamastu.
Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am love, I am love, pure love, I am love, I am love, pure love. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am peace, I am peace, divine peace. I am peace, I am peace, divine peace. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am joy, I am joy, endless joy. I am joy, I am joy, endless joy. Ananda Swarupa, Prema Swarupa, Ananda Swarupa. Ananda Swarupa, Prema Swarupa, Ananda Swarupa. Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om. Remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, remind me, my Lord, who I am. am Om, eternal Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti Om.
Thank you, first of all, to Swami Nirvananandaji, Swami Nirvanananda Saraswati, who joined us last night for Kirtan, and he's still here. So every year he comes, and every year he blesses us with this song, which is so inspiring and so beautiful. Thank you, Swamiji. And on behalf of all of us, we offer our warm welcome to Swami Medhananda. Very happy to have another brother here in the monastery. And a returned brother. And loved your story of how Swami Swahanji has pulled you back here in spite of your attempts to get away. So, and thanks to Swami Arupeshananda for his very interesting and unusual talk about the multiverse, and we'll be joking about it, I think, for quite some time. And as you probably know, Swami Arupeshananda stays at our retreat center in Pinyon Hills in the desert. So now and then we'll be having, again, in-person retreats there. So keep tuned for that. Next week, our speaker will be Swami Rupananda, and his topic is the spiritual quest. And probably most of you know that we have classes throughout the week. Tuesday afternoons, Bhagavatam. Tuesday evenings, Shanti Gita. Wednesday evenings, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Thursday evenings, the practice of the presence of God, alternating with Karma Yoga. And Friday evenings, returning in September, teachings of Swami Abhedananda. So there's every evening prayer at 6 p.m. That's also streamed live. Many people join from their homes. And if this is your first time here, our hearty welcome. The bookshop is open after the talk. And all blessings of the divine on us today. Thank you.